another installment of the Keizer Oral History Project. It's a project brought to you by the City of Keizer, the Keizer Points of Interest Committee, and the Keizer Heritage Foundation. My name is Jason Cox. Today I'm here with two longtime veterans of Keizer Fire District, Mr. Dan Woolley and Mr. Jim Trett. So we're going to start right out. And Dan, I understand your family had a history of service in the fire service.
Yeah, my father was fire chief in Southern Oregon, Ophir Rural Fire Protection District, and I believe they formed around 1962, and he was the first fire chief down there. So they'd allowed me to ride around on the tailboards of the fire truck back in those days, and that's how I got involved in the fire service from back in those days.
So what'd you enjoy about it?
Well, I just enjoyed, of course, all kids like to play with fire trucks, and it was something that was, we didn't have too many calls down there. My dad did, and it was exciting, of course, and it was all just fire only. And, getting fire apparatus, pulling hoses, and squirting water, and just a lot of fun.
And Jim, how'd you get interested?
I got involved. I was a member of the Salem Elks, and the Keizer Elks had just formed. And we'd done a visitation out here. We were at the Keizer Elks Lodge, and Chief Sanford at the time said, "Hey, we're going over to the fire station to finish our social visit." And so we all got on the back of the fire truck and drove over there. I thought that was pretty cool. And then Dwayne figured out I lived out here, and he said, "You need to be a volunteer." And I was planning to move to South Salem in about 6 months, and I'll do it for 6 months because I get to drive with the lights and sirens and all those kinds of neat things. And 6 months later, they called and said, you can move in any time. I said, "I think I'll stay here. I'm having fun with the fire district." So I did that. So it started kind of the same way. It's a fun, neat thing to do, and ended up realizing that you made an impact in your community.
Well, you guys almost make it sound like a fun thing you were doing. I mean, it's very serious, but you were enjoying yourselves also. And this is, I think it's worth remembering that this was volunteer duty. So what were you guys doing to make a living, support your families?
Surveying.
I was in broadcast radio at the time.
Oh, okay. And so did you enjoy the communications radio part of that, especially?
I was having a ball. I had that was going to be my career choice. And was for a while, and then kind of went off into other areas. But at the time, I had no desire to be a career firefighter or anything else. It was just, I felt good. In my case, I felt good because I knew I was helping people that really needed it. And it was a strong social network right there, too. We did a lot of social things and had a lot of fun. And then Keizer Fire has always had a history of being involved in the community, and some of those activities I was enjoying too. So I think that's what got under the skin and made me want to be involved.
I understand Chief Dwayne Sanford, he was the chief at the time you guys joined, correct?
Right.
Was the chief from 1965 all the way up to 1988, quite a long time. And I understand he had quite the personality as well. What's some of the what are some of your favorite Chief Sanford anecdotes when you get together and talk about the old days?
Well, Chief Sanford is a great guy. Gosh, I don't know anybody that didn't like Chief Sanford, but he was very personable. He had a very, very loud voice. He treated people very well, like everyone was his friend kind of thing. And the thing I liked about Dwayne is if you did something wrong, which we all did, obviously every now and then, if he yelled at you, the next day it was forgotten kind of thing. He didn't hold a grudge kind of thing. And he let us do different things. At the time, while he was chief, the fire district changed. The community was changing. And he was such a great person about community support. The fire station was the hub, really, of Keizer back in those days. And he allowed us to do different functions. In other words, we had a baseball team, softball team. We did firemen's musters. What else did we do, Jim?
Oh, just a lot of family-oriented kind of things. Picnic was a big thing back then. So Thing I always remember about Dwayne is if you wanted to know where he was, you just had to be quiet for about, listen, and if within 5 minutes you'd hear a laugh. And as soon as you heard that laugh, you knew that's where Dwayne was. And Dan's right. If you did something wrong, he'd kind of, you know, very politely let you know you'd done something wrong. It was never a beat you down kind of thing. It was just, you screwed up and, oh, by the way, and now let's go.
Move forward, yeah.
Yeah, let's move forward and have some fun. So
Yeah.
it was just, you knew you messed up and you knew what to do next time, and then it was over. You know, so.
So you both joined in January the year 1974. You were January, and you were a little bit later in the year, correct?
Yeah, Jim started, I think, actually a month before I did. June, I think I started, I shouldn't put words in, but June of 74, I think. I
Okay.
think Jim started just before I did, yeah.
So that was before, there's certainly no such thing as the building that we're filming this here today at the Keizer Civic Center. No city of Keizer. There was a Keizer Service District. There was the
Right.
school, and you had Keizer Fire Hall.
Right.
So tell me, let's talk a little bit more about the activities that occurred in Keizer Fire Hall and the role that that hub played in the community.
Well, as far as the way we're alerted as far as plectrons.
Well, we'll
the
get to
fire
that.
side of it,
More
or-
of the social part.
Oh, the social part of it?
What were
Oh,
some big
gosh.
events that happened there? Or not so big events?
Well, we had some, I think we had right after I joined, I think we had the last Fireman's Ball, so that was an event that ended in about 74, 75. We had pancake breakfast. We had some events. The pancake breakfast, of course, still continues. We had the candy cane program. We had the Sweethearts Banquet. And we had, for a few years there, back in the late 70s, early 80s, we had that group from Hawaii that would come and put on some
Right.
Hawaiian dance at the fire station there. And maybe Jim remembers better than I do how that came about. I think Dwayne or Sam Orchid or someone.
Knew them. There was a high school group from Hawaii. They would come over and participate. I want to almost say Rose Festival they were involved with. But then they'd come down here and they did some things at McNary. They'd do some things. We had them at the fire hall. So those kinds of things. There were several years just before Dan and I joined where the fire district actually did a float in the Rose Festival parade, the Grand Floral Parade every year. So we'd have the princesses come down. They'd show up for a day at the fire station. It was just a lot of family stuff. Part of that was because, like we've said, it was the hub of the community, but it was also a way to keep volunteers in town. I mean, if you wanted to go do much of anything food-wise or anything like that, you had to go into Salem, which pulled volunteers away from here. So they did a lot down there just to keep the families close, and we had big picnic every summer involving the staff and the whole family. So it was some of that stuff was designed to do that, was to keep the volunteers local and something to do, but also it always included the community. Bring those people in and enjoy that atmosphere also.
We mentioned the candy cane tradition where fire trucks go through the streets of Keizer. I hear them on my street every year with Santa on the back handing out candy canes, and that was a well-established thing by the time you guys came. Was that correct?
That started about
62, I think.
1962, 63.
Yeah.
So what's kept that going? You have every group has traditions that fall by the wayside through the years. Old traditions fall, new traditions come. What made this one stick?
Well, I think, gosh, it was something you get out in the community like that, the kids just love to see Santa Claus. And we love going out with Santa on the back of the fire engines, and you go through the whole community, and all the kids get to meet and greet Santa Claus if they want to, and Santa hands them a candy cane, and it's a great way, and it's a great tradition just to carry on. Everyone really enjoys that part of it. That's a long day, and generally, obviously in December, the weather's not the greatest around here, and it's a little bit demanding, but basically, everyone loves the kids and loves to participate in that event.
I think when Dan and I started, we were almost done by 1. We'd start at 8,
Yeah,
and we'd be done by 1. And then as Keizer, of course, grew, now it's a day-long, event where you've really got to go. But back then, I mean, if there was a sick kid, we'd go into the bedroom and give him a candy cane. And, I think it stuck because the community really looks at that as part of being in Keizer. One of the things that they can look forward to. I mean, we get calls at the fire station beginning in 1st December wondering when Candy Cane Day was, because grandkids now live in South Salem, but grandparents are going to have them over for the night so they could be there for that candy cane when Santa goes by, and you'd have people getting ready for it, And for us, it was always, I've got some great stories about what happens on Candy Cane Day, and I remember we were out on doing candy canes, and I remember a girl, she was 23, and I remember that because of what she said. Mom's got her by the ear, pulling her out of the front door, and the lady is saying, "Mom, I'm 23 years old," and the lady's going, "I don't care. You've had a candy cane from Santa every year since you've been 6. You're going to get one this year too." So those kinds of things, those kinds of stories, I remember years later. So I think it was, for a lot of us, it was as big a part of everything as it was for the community.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, for sure. So, in the 70s, there was you still hear the siren tested at noon every Friday, and
right.
in all practicality, we've sort of moved on to more advanced technologies, and even then, the days of a siren and a phone tree were a little bit past. How did you get word of being? I guess first of all, how often were you summoned from your homes for any kind of?
We had a radio. We had called a plectron. It's a radio box that dispatch Salem Fire dispatched us, and they send out a tone, and that sets off your plectron, which alerts you and tells you what type of fire you're having and where it's at. And we use that on the fire side, and then also as we got into the medical field, and we used it for our medical alert too. That's how we were alerted. But back in those days, the fire siren also blew. So not only did your plectron go off, but the fire siren blew also. So we had a dual way of alerting us, and some days it'd blow. Obviously, if you have a call, the people got tired, I think, of hearing the fire siren go off 4 or 5 times a day back in those days.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah. The plectrons, you got to remember, were a big box. Not big, but they were 6 inches long. You couldn't carry them around. So the siren was, if you were at the store or if you were out in the yard, you could hear it and know that you had to come. And so that was just kind of the backup at the time. It was loud. I mean, remember going into a meeting at South Salem High School one night, and the siren went off, and I heard it there because I had to go back. And we had a call right about then. So, but that's what that was for us, was a great backup.
So, it's interesting that they're still called fire districts, because so little of what fire districts do now, thanks largely to preventative efforts by fire departments, smoke detector laws, different fire codes, building, you can't use some of the same materials that you used to. So a lot of, obviously, what the fire district does now is medical. Let's talk about first though, are there any major fires that you fought that stick out in your mind today?
well, I'll start out, but he's the one. I remember back probably late 70s, if I was going to guess, I'd say 78, 79. We had an apartment fire down here off 5th, off of James Street, and it's probably 24 to 30 apartments in that complex, I'm not sure, but the fire started downstairs, and actually Jim lived there at the time in that apartment complex. So I know a lot. That was one of the biggest fires that I was on, but Jim can tell a better story than me because he was living there at the time.
What, did you need something to do?
I guess it was one of those. It happened started about 11.
About when was this?
1976 in there somewhere, I would think. I'd been on the department a couple of years.
Okay.
And actually started in the apartment next to mine. And I heard light bulbs exploding, which I realized now at the time, I thought somebody was out in the parking lot dropping half-empty beer bottles, and because it just sounded like that. And in fact, I went out in the parking lot and looked. The apartment manager was in another building. He was looking. About half an hour later, I heard the sound of the fire, so we phoned that in. And it actually killed my two neighbors in that apartment. So that was undoubtedly the biggest one I was in. I remember our crews it basically started in their apartment and went up into the second floor, and so did more damage up there than I was on the first floor, but did more damage up that way. But I remember there running to my car to go to the station to come back to fight the fire, and I remember opening the door, closing the door, saying, "Hey Jim, they're going to bring the fire truck to you." But I remember the frustration of we attacked it, and it would pop up somewhere else. And I'm going, of all the fires we can't seem to put out real well, we did, but it was at the time it seemed like it took forever for the crews to knock that thing down. But so that was probably my most memorable. We had a couple big ones out at Chemawa Indian School. A couple of the old dorms burned there. Going into downtown Salem was backup for some of those. Remember those, but the most memorable one would be the apartments that I lived in.
Oh, for sure. So how do you cope with something like that? We're not talking about firefighting as an abstract concept. We're talking about your friend, people especially then, Geyser was a lot smaller, and you just had a better chance of knowing whoever was involved. So, how did the district teach you mentally to handle that stress?
Well, we had classes, and different people would come in, and if we needed that kind of thing, and talk to us about different situations and different types of things, and it was okay. If something bothered you, it was okay, to pull somebody aside and say, this cult bothered me. Maybe there was a fatality in the fire, and don't keep it inside of you. Find somebody to talk to and kind of get it off your chest, kind of thing, and talk it over, and that helped. We had chaplains we could call if we needed to, also, and still do. But yeah, the district made. Things have changed, obviously, like we've talked about, but even back in those days, we felt some relief by finding someone to talk to and just talk things over. Yeah.
I think we all had our own support group, people that you knew you could talk to, and if something got under your skin. And there were times where, you knew the people involved, and for me, I think it was an overriding sense of, as long as you could look at it and say we went in and we did the best we could, and I think we did that a lot. We could make that statement. Yes, we did the best we could, so I think that did a lot of it. A lot of times the people who were involved came back to us at the district and would say, "Thank you for what you did do. We really appreciate it." I think that made things easier at times. So.
Sure. So we talked a little bit about how the transition started, or just that the transition happened. How did that? Was there anything in particular that started this slow transition from pretty much exclusively fighting fires and I know I've seen things like flood, pumping out a flooded basement or something like that, to what is it? 97% of the calls now are medical. I may not. Don't quote that statistic, but I know that it's very, very, very high. How did that transition start?
Well, it was like we talked about, like we all talk about, is when the TV series Emergency did come on TV, where Johnny Gage and Roy DeSoto were on Squad 51, responding to not only fire calls but responding to medical calls. That truly did change the fire service. So then the public really demanded that we not only do the fire side of it, but we need to be trained in EMS, because they were calling us on heart attacks, traffic accidents, different times of medical calls, and we had to get the training to, to answer those calls. And we became EMTs in 74, 75, and like I said, not necessarily because we wanted to, because that's where the fire service was headed. We were headed toward the medical EMS side of it also, and we just accepted those duties and became EMTs and started duty shifts. Yeah.
We had a volunteer at the time, Bob Wickman, who later served on the board. Great guy, but he was heavily involved in the medical side of things and wanted us to. And I remember Chief Sanford at one point saying, "We're a fire department. We'll put a Band-Aid on a cut in a car accident, but that's going to be it." And then, as Dan said, the emergency TV show came on, and 6 months later, we were ordering our first rig. Once again, that was Dwayne. We're not going to do that. Well, yes, we are, because that's what the community wants. So once again, he responded to what the community wanted. I don't think he ever really intended or wanted to go there himself, but did and supported it. I mean, it wasn't half-hearted support. It was once we went there, he really supported it.
So did you find that as enjoyable as the fireside?
Not as enjoyable. No, I've liked the fire side of it more. I enjoyed everything about the fire department, though, but I'd rather just do the fire side of it only, though. No, I mean, you don't like some of the medical calls you go on. They're not as pleasant as one might think or whatever, but I like the fire side of it a lot better. Dwayne was very good about, he really did want to get in the EMS thing. But yet, like I said, he did have an open mind, so and he knew where we were headed, the public demand and stuff. So in 1979, I think is when we got our first rescue, which is Rescue 353. Was in 1979, I believe. And then he threw his support in on that, and we got the equipment to respond in it.
Yeah, how about you, Jim?
Kind of the same way. I mean, I did enjoy the medical side. When I was growing up, actually, at one point, Dr. Castelline, who was the doctor in town at the time, was convinced I was going to be a doctor. So I had a kind of an inkling towards that, and but that's where But I really enjoyed both sides, fire and the medical.
So, Jim, I understand that you worked quite a bit with the schools as a education officer type position.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about your work there.
Actually, I replaced a guy that actually started it. Bill Holmstrom was the first public information guy. I did some public information before that. It was once again Dwayne. You're in radio. You know how to do that. And no, I didn't, but we made it work. But then they hired Bill as a deputy fire marshal, and then made him public information, because there was a move in the fire service towards that. And then I took it over in 1995. And basically we became part of for several years, I had a mailbox at Whitaker Middle School. At one point, the assistant principal said, "You need a key," because we were up there just about every day. We did a lot in the grade schools, but we were a natural fit for health classes in the 6th, 7th, 8th grade. So we did a lot there, and then a little bit at the high school, and a lot of community outreach, open houses, 2 open houses a year, and things like that. So heavily involved in things like that, and that was a great part of my job. I really enjoyed that, interacting with the kids. I grew up in the Y, doing camp counseling, things like that, so I had worked with kids a lot. And so this was just an extension of 2 things I got to do that I really loved.
So what would the transition, Chief Sanford retired in 1988, 89, in the late 80s. And briefly, there was a chief that came in from Fairbanks, Alaska, and his name was Barry Jennings. And so what was it that, it sounds like he was, a good professional, but what was wrong with the fit in Keizer?
I think part of the problem was he followed Dwayne Sanford. Dwayne had that personality where you just kind of liked him. He stuck his hand out in a hurry. He'd laugh and joke with you. And Barry was more of a laid back, professional, if you will. Not that Dwayne wasn't, but Barry exuded that I'm a professional kind of thing. I'm not going to get too close. I think was my perception anyway.
Yeah, and just wasn't as community oriented. Just wasn't as close to the guys. Just didn't fit in like Dwayne. But like he said, he had big shoes to fill because Dwayne, we all loved Dwayne, and so he had big shoes to fill, and he just couldn't fill those shoes, and he was a fire chief for just a little less than a year.
So that led to Greg Frank becoming chief. And how do you, he'd been a volunteer for quite some time, I believe, correct?
Right. That was one of the things that to Greg's favor he started out as a volunteer, worked his way through the ranks, and Greg's a personal guy, of course, knows the community, especially running the store there. He got to know everybody, and Greg did a much better job of filling the shoes that Dwayne left behind when he retired. And then that's when we really started getting into the medical field, was after, it's because the community again, we were starting to get 3 or 4 calls maybe a day, whatever. And like you said, 85, 90% of them was EMS calls. And Greg had to deal with that and did a good job dealing with that.
What did you think?
Part of the transition, I think, was because we were serviced by a private ambulance service, Willamette Ambulance, and Salem Fire decided they were going to get into the medical field, and that kind of, I think, forced us a little bit to get into the transport business, because all of a sudden the private went away. But yeah, Greg handled that well.
Yeah.
He was not quite as gregarious as Dwayne, but he was there for you. You knew he cared, and you knew he backed you up. And so he made that transition, I think, a lot easier.
And so Greg was fire chief for, I believe, about 17 years.
17 years.
And
Yeah.
he retired and is still running Ace Hardware, and now we have Chief Jeff Callan there. And I believe he joined in early 08, late 2007, in that time period. So let's jump back all the way to the beginning of getting towards the end. Let's jump all the way back to the beginning. Engine 1, the very first engine Keizer had. Do you happen to know how it left the custody of the district? And I know you know how you got it back.
We sold it to an agency, and I can't remember the agency in Southern Oregon, as a fire truck. And then they sold it to a lumber company in Eastern Oregon as their fire.
Sumter, Oregon, yeah.
Sumter, yeah.
Sumter, yeah.
As their fire rig, and that's where
We bought it back.
some of our volunteers were out there hunting, is my understanding, and saw it. And one of the guys knew the engine and said, "That's ours." And they came back and did some looking around, and sure enough, it was. So they went out and bought it.
They'd bought that engine, I can't remember what year they'd bought it, the logging operation, and they'd let it sit outside, and the pump froze and cracked the pump. So then it really wasn't being used anymore, and so we bought it back and then reconditioned it.
And that's used today for, what did you, well, you tell me, what did you use it for?
Parades. Yeah.
Pretty much.
And you said was there some mustering with it as well?
We did some mustering, yeah. We was talking earlier about the mustering, and actually the muster truck that we used was a 1929 Purse that we had. That was we bought from Silverton Fire District back many years ago, and we ended up selling that back to Silverton Fire District 25 or 30 years ago. This actually, the engine 1 that we have now, we actually really didn't use in our mustering part of it. We just used it in our parades. Yeah.
Why was it important to bring that back?
Well, it's your original piece of apparatus, and it's kind of neat to have that. If you can keep that in your engine house, it's for the historical part of it. It's part of our history, and it's nice to be able to keep it at the station.
Particularly in your role, having worked with children, what did they think when they saw, this big long fire engine with the ladder next to, sort of a piece of history there?
Engine 1, I think it was an old fire truck, and they really liked it. actually, we kept them off that more than we did off our big ones.
Yeah.
You know, don't touch it, you'll scratch your paint. I mean, they literally took that down to nuts and bolts to restore it and did it all the way back up. So we wouldn't let kids climb on that as much as we would on the new apparatus. Sure, climb all over that. The old one, don't touch it, you might scratch it. So.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for joining us. Also like to thank the City of Keizer and KeizerTV for having us here. Again, this is a project, the oral history through the Keizer Heritage Foundation and the Keizer Points of Interest Committee as well. You can see this one on KeizerTV, and you can see some of our past work at KeizerTV.com. Thanks for watching.